Welcome to Home Again. This is a podcast about what moving countries changes inside a person. And today I'm joined by Mitchell, who moved from South Africa to the UK in 2023. Mitchell, thank you for being here. And before we begin, there is no pressure to have perfect answers. This is simply a space to reflect on your experience in your own words. And so, Mitchell, let's start at the very beginning. Just for the audience to hear from you, where did you move from and where did you move to?
Hello. I'm Mitchell. I moved from Cape Town to Norwich, and now I'm in a place called Aylsham, which is just outside of Norwich.
Well, take me back to that point in your life. What was happening when you decided to leave Cape Town, South Africa?
Um, so it was always something I was considering, but it was never something I took seriously. And then 2022, there was a bit more thought going into it. I was living in my flat, and I was feeling that I'd basically just become a bit stagnant and nothing really was changing. I was doing the same thing over and over. Yeah, so that was that. And then I had started a relationship with my partner who lived in Norwich. So we'd met a long time before, and then that was a big factor in the decision.
So you felt life was in a bit of a rut, and part of the move was relationship driven. Uh, what felt harder to leave behind?
Definitely the people. So the friends, especially my friend group that I made in Cape Town. We are extremely close, and leaving that was probably harder than leaving anything else. Leaving the city was
Mm.
hard because I'd been living in Cape Town for 12 years, I think, by that time. So everything had just become a bit routine. So I
Mm.
think the routine was also quite hard to leave, but mostly the people that was the hardest part.
Yeah, in large part, it sounds like it had become home for you, and people form a big part of that, and so understandably, that becomes the difficult thing to leave behind. And if I may ask, what did you imagine life would feel like once you arrived in Norwich?
I didn't really have any idea what it would be like. I knew it would be different, but I didn't know how different would it be. I didn't know if it was going to be different. Um, just because it wasn't like I was moving to a country that I might not have understood the language or anything like that. It's going from somewhere where I was living in South Africa, being English, moving to England, and being able to speak English made life a lot easier compared to if I had gone somewhere else. I think I would have expected a bigger shock or culture shock going somewhere else.
Yeah, those subtle changes which suddenly aren't so subtle once you shift of a different language and all sorts that often hits people in the face. And so when you're moving to an English speaking country, that stays something which most think is familiar, but in some regards, it doesn't stay familiar. Let's actually talk about your transition into life in Norwich. At what point did the reality begin to feel different from what you expected?
I'm trying to think when it really hit in, and I think it was probably the second week that I was here. The first week or two was very much everything was new and exciting. The second week, we'd gone out for dinner and we'd walked there at something never thought I'd be able to do is walk, what, probably 2, 3 kilometers to a restaurant and then walk back at night that time. So that was probably the biggest shock when I realized, oh, things
Mm.
are quite different here. Um, yeah, it, I was constantly on edge and I didn't have to be, but it's so ingrained to be looking around to make sure that there's nobody hiding in the dark corners. And it's just like, oh, cool, this is fine.
Those changes in experience from home country to the other swing around so differently depending on where you come from. And so you explain a process of being in a context back home where you're always on guard, always needing to look out for what potential hidden dangers there are, into a relatively safer place. I know speaking to some, that often reverses as well. And there are people that come from safe places and suddenly find themselves in dangerous situations because they aren't as aware as they should be. And so it's helpful that you mentioned that, because those are often the first things that hit us when we move. It's the reality of what the differences are from for the day-to-day life. But no doubt there are some hidden realities in all of this. As you look back, what did you grieve that you did not expect to grieve?
Very silly things. So yeah, um, mostly food. um,
Yeah.
there are many food items that I feel like I just expected them to be here when I got here, but they weren't. And
Mm,
it's very silly things like a Simba chip is not here.
mhm,
So all the flavors that we could get in South Africa, here it's mostly salt and vinegar or cheese. Um, so there's no Mrs. Ball's fruit chutney flavored Simba chips or those knickknacks or anything like that here. So I think food wise was probably the biggest change or the biggest thing that I noticed straight away.
mhm.
Um, yeah. The other thing is color,
Yeah.
where Norwich, when I first got here, is very white.
Okay. Yeah.
um, and I remember remarking on being like, where are all the people of color? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think I saw any for the first couple of weeks that I was here. So it felt very weird. Um, yeah.
It's a big change that you're speaking about, because when you come from a cultural context where there has been a lot of work like South Africa to bring more of an integrated approach, shifting into contexts, particularly in Europe, where it becomes one more single demographic based, so one group of people, and that's what's predominant, it does suddenly smack you in the face. And so you're not alone in that. I know, speaking to other people um, who move contexts like this, that is a big reality shift for them, because uh, all of a sudden you don't see that variety in skin tone, the variety in languages being spoken, the different cultural contexts, and so that does sort of smack you in the face. So it is understandable that that becomes something that stands out when you move into a context where everyone looks a lot like you do. Um, Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that as part of that hidden reality, because it's that we don't often notice as being the what will become the shock factor for us. But it's those hidden realities of what stands in contrast to our cultural expectations that actually become the biggest changes for us. You also mentioned food, and you gave a list of very South African foods. For the listeners there, Simba chips are various potato crisps. South Africa has a vast variety of flavors, which other countries don't seem to have. If you come to Germany, it's virtually only paprika. And so these are things that we miss out on. Fruit chutney, knickknacks, which is a maize snack, all foods from home, which suddenly become quite difficult to come across. And yeah, those are the hidden realities of a move. Um, as we shift then from that, what did you first feel about this cultural shift that you experienced? How long did it take you just to adjust that? Well, this is the norm.
It took quite a while. Um, I still don't think it's normal, probably. Yeah, especially that kind of thing where there isn't as much culture. Well, there is culture here, there's history here, but it's all mostly one type where,
Yes.
yeah, especially living in Cape Town, you had so many different people from so many different cultures, countries, and it was just like a boiling pot of everybody, which was quite
Yeah.
nice. So it took a while to come to terms with, okay, cool. Now I'm in a place where it's mostly one kind of thing. I'm
Yes.
pretty sure if I was in somewhere more like London or Manchester, where there's more international happening, like more people from different countries live there and work there, it would be different. But specifically, Norwich was more of one kind of culture. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so it's took a while. It was also a bit weird to go from everybody around me being South African or yeah, from I mean, sure, I had friends from other countries and things, but all of a sudden they were the minority and now I am. So like I felt like I was the import all of a sudden. And
Yeah.
took a while to be like, okay, cool. I can fit in here if I need to. It's fine. But it did feel weird because people would notice, oh, you've got a different accent where you're from. And
Mhm.
all of a sudden the spotlight's on you and you standing out. So yeah.
Yes, and that feeling of standing out is one that, suddenly creeps up on you. When did you first feel the weight of being an outsider or other in your new country?
Quite quickly because it was the Rugby World Cup, and I can't remember if that was in 2023 or I think it was 2023.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, um,
Mm.
especially walking into the town centre with like my Springbok jersey on, and people were noticing and people were looking, and quite a few comments. So yeah, I felt that was probably when it was the strongest.
And so, yeah, there's that shift where suddenly you realize, hang on, this is so different. And it is normally in these big sporting moments or these situations where there's something that's culturally or nationally particular to your home country, where suddenly where you're faced in a different context can be the same thing. Rugby World Cup, for example. All of a sudden you're in the minority in that. So it's exactly what you say. That's where people begin to feel the weight of being the outsider, and that looks different for different people. Uh, was there maybe a moment where you began to question your decision to move?
There has been, but that was probably in December. So I had arrived in July of 2023, and I think December, where I'm very used to a December that is sunny and hot. Um, Here it is the complete opposite. Obviously, it's Northern Hemisphere. It's
Mhm.
cold, grey, and dark. So I think then was probably the time that I was questioning the decision the most. I was like, is this where I need to be? Do I prefer being there where it's this? But yeah, weather plays a big part in that feeling of, is this where I want to be? It's such a silly thing, though.
But you've really hit the nail on the head. There's a few key areas where we suddenly notice the differences. It's the people that are different. It's the food stuff, just the experiences day to day that are different. And it's these key moments in the year cycle of what we're so used to that suddenly hit. So if you, like you said, moving from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere, the whole year is out of whack because suddenly Christmas becomes a cold experience, not the warm, sunny one that you're used to, or suddenly your birth date shifts from one end of being a spring or a summer baby into being an autumn or winter baby. And these are things we don't notice. But all of those things suddenly raise questions. Hang on, is this what I signed up for? And so you helped really just to show us quite a few areas in your experience of hidden realities that suddenly jumped forward for us. What I'd like to do is just take us back to something that you mentioned in the notes that you had given in signing up to be on the show. And you spoke there that you feel more connected to being South African now than you did before. Maybe you could
Mhm.
expand on that a bit. What changed in you that made that aspect more visible to you?
I think it's just moving from the country that has been home for such a long time for you.
Mm.
Um, it's something you take for granted when you're there, is that it is a big part of you, even if you aren't the most patriotic person. Um, yeah, I think just moving to another country and where you are different, it brings where you're from to the forefront in your mind and just about who you are. In South Africa, I'm just another South African.
Yeah.
But when I'm abroad, all of a sudden I am different to everybody else.
Yes.
I am showing them what's possible from a South African that has moved. I am unique in that regard
Mm.
amongst people that aren't from here. So I have a different experience. Yeah, so that was that. And all of a sudden, it's like silly things. So, like hearing somebody speaking one of the South African national languages, be it Zulu, Afrikaans, Sotho, any of those, like you pick up on those so quickly. But even just
Mm.
accents, I've gone on train trips to London, and on the train, I've heard somebody speaking with an accent, and I'm like, oh, that person is from South Africa, and going up to them and talking to them and finding out where they're from. All of a sudden, you have that kind of connection that you can go to somebody with. So
Mm.
all of a sudden, you are drawing to those roots because those roots are there, but it's not just yours. There are other people that have the same roots that you can now go and have that common ground with, and you can be like, "I'm from here. You're from here. It's nice to see
Mm.
you." So,
Yes.
yeah.
It's so funny because I can think about situations myself where uh, things back home that you'd never do just to suddenly go and speak to somebody because you've heard them speak, or you'd be sitting on public transport or something and hear somebody speaking and you'll jump in just because of that excitement. Hang on, you're like me. And so part of what resonates with me from what you said is just the whole idea of moving countries sort of brings to the forefront the aspects of your home country that have taken root inside you. And so when you said you feel more connected to being South African now than before, I think for so many that is true because the parts of you that are shaped by home suddenly are what shine forward and are what represent who you are to the world. And so you become aware of that. If we go a little more broadly, what part of you had to change in order to adapt to life in the UK?
What needed to adapt? Quite a bit. It's quite a different lifestyle here. So it's such a silly thing where South Africa, if you want to go and visit your friends, you'd often just go over for on the weekend and you'd have a braai or you just hang out or whatever. Where here, it's very much like if you want to see somebody, most of the time you're going to meet them at a pub. Um, so that's quite a different experience, and I took a while to get used to that. But other things are just being able to interact with people. So playing ultimate frisbee in Cape Town, it was a very community driven thing. So it doesn't matter what team you're on, you'd often end up hanging out together. Um, where here, I was using that to try and meet people. You'd go, you'd play, and
Mm.
then everybody would be like, "Cool, see you next time." And I don't know if that's because of me coming in as an outsider, um, and it could be that because that team has been formed for a while, so they might be used to hanging out with each other, and now somebody else is coming into this group, so it could be from that point of view. Um, so it's just a different experience on meeting people and
Mm.
that social aspect, and that's quite a big one.
Mm. But what you speak about is uh, one of those situations that social settings change drastically depending on which context you're in. And so, where you're able to interact very differently at home and with your friends, suddenly that changes when you're in a new context, a foreign context where society expectations are different. It's not just as free, it's not necessarily as open to spur of the moment things. And so there are those suddenly parts of you that have to adapt in order to fit in with the culture better. Did you maybe sense any area that maybe in your identity there was a need to shift in ways that you maybe didn't expect?
If there was, I haven't figured those out yet. So
And that's an understandable uh, response, because I also believe that this becomes a very evident thing in depending on the context you're moving to. And you've already mentioned a few times for us that one of the easier aspects for you in the move was that it was going from an English country to an English country. And so language wasn't that. And so for a lot of people, what happens is when identity shifts happen, it's because you lose an element of yourself because you can't just communicate in the same way. And
Mhm.
so just the fact of you saying, actually right now I can't think, there may be something, but I don't know, just highlights the differences in the context that you're moving to and how language plays part of that. And so it's worth listeners remembering that the context you move into shapes some of the way you see yourself. Some of your identity will be different, particularly if language shifts, or you can't just be the same in expressing yourself in a new culture. Let's shift focus a bit and speak a bit about relationships and belonging, because often what happens is we have the excitement of moving to a new country. Either it's a new job, there is a romantic interest, something is there that gets us to move, but we don't think about the impacts that those may have on current relationships or where we belong. And so that again is a very unique experience for from person to person. So, Mitchell, how did relocation affect your closest relationships?
It's quite interesting how relocating filters out people that you would just interact with once or twice versus those people that are very close to you and are willing to put in the effort now that you have moved. So, yeah, there's definitely been a shift in a lot of my relationships with people. Um, it's interesting how much you miss out on because life happens, and where before you're in the same city, you're in the same circle of people, so you interact a lot, and so you're getting those updates just by existing. Um, Now you have to put in the effort to try and talk to those people, see how what's happening in their lives. Um,
Mhm.
so it's always effort now to stay in touch. Um, Not that that's a bad thing, because you need to decide who you want to put that effort into keeping those relationships
Yeah.
alive. Why do you want to keep them alive, especially if you have no thoughts about moving back? Then are those relationships worth continuing to talk to those people, putting in that effort, if you're just going to be somebody that you can talk to on the phone or a text instead of
Mhm.
actually having them physically in your life anymore? So
Yeah.
it has changed. I do have a close group of friends that I still put in effort to message
Mhm.
um, and chat to, way more WhatsApp groups than I used to have. Um,
Yeah.
because now it's like, cool, these people, we have that common interest. We're going to make a group together. Um, and they're all the same people from life, but now I'm putting in more effort because it's like, okay, cool, we can engage with this more easily than having to do a full catch
Mm.
up. So if
Yeah.
it's a specific genre of music that you're interested in, you can just share that. And that's one of the things that I do at the moment with my group of friends is we have a music group that I think there's 8 of us, maybe 9 of us in there. And sometimes we don't message each other. We'll just once a month or once every now and then drop a new song in there, and then that starts a new conversation. So it's interesting because that's just another way of communicating with people and
Mm.
continuing with those relationships that can be hard to just maintain.
So there's change of relationship naturally with people that were back home. You mentioned the effort that's required just to keep those going, and so there will be those expected changes, but it's not all change and building there. It's building back in a new context as well. Obviously, new relationships that build and friendships. Undoubtedly, you have many of those that have formed as well. But when did you first feel a sense of belonging in the UK?
I think I got quite lucky with this. So no, so I got quite lucky. So lucky my partner, her sister and her partner moved to Norwich as well. So that basically when they moved, I got an automatic friend. So which is quite nice. That's a good thing I get along with him. Um, and then I also had some friends that I had met online in online gaming. They were living in the UK and they've also moved to Norwich. So getting friends that way has given me a sense of belonging. Just because
Mm.
I've got a small group of friends that I can at least interact with. And it's quite nice to have in that group two people that lived in South Africa for most of their lives as
Mm.
well. So we can talk about things from home. If that's something, because this is one of the things where, from one of your previous questions, where I didn't actually have an answer, um, a silly thing like a reference to an advert. So
Yeah.
being able to talk to somebody that knows what you're talking about all of a sudden is so nice compared to, because I would often reference things and people will be like, I have no idea what you're talking about because I was referencing an advert that I'd seen growing up, where now I have
Mm.
that connection. So I have that sense of belonging from there, which helps. Another one is having pets. It sounds
Mhm.
really silly, but I feel like they are from here. So it makes me feel like I belong here because I need to care for them. I need to be with them here. So it grounds me a bit.
So it really sounds like three key elements brought together that sense of belonging. It was uh, people and pets, so that aspect of the daily interaction within your life. It was place, so all of those that coming together in Norwich and forming life and routine around that one location, and also moments. So people that you had played games with, people from home, past home experiences in South Africa, so that there were similarities in those moments, and all of that really came together to give you this experience of belonging. It changes a lot when you are able to just have uh, a context of relationship that forms around you. Mitchell, looking at your life now,
Mhm.
who who are you that you were not before this move?
Oh, um, there's a lot that hasn't changed in me. Um,
Mhm,
I think the thing that has changed a lot is I'm a lot more organized.
mhm,
Not that I have everything in order in my life or anything like that, but I feel like before I moved here, I was quite messy. Um,
mhm.
so that was with everything. And now I like a bit of order, so I like the house clean. I like to make sure that my workspace is clean where it never used to be clean. So yeah, I also, as much as I like to do things spontaneously, I do also like to have a plan in action, like in place, so that I know, okay, cool, this is what we're doing on this day, because it just helps a bit. So I think I've just gotten a bit more structured since moving here, and I think
Mhm.
that might be because of the fact that things are different here. So
That's right.
I need to actually plan. Where before it's like, well, I'm in South Africa, things are how they are. We're
Yeah.
here. Sure, things are how they are here, but things are different here. So I need to make sure that I know what I'm doing. Like silly thing is driving here is, even though it's basically the same, we're on the same side of the road and everything, miles per hour, I still haven't figured out how much longer things will take. Because if it says it's a 100-mile drive, my brain is like, that's pretty much going to take as long as a 100-kilometer drive, isn't it? And it's like, no, it's not. So I need to have planned things a lot more than just thinking default thoughts.
Yes.
Yeah.
So interesting. And what has relocation taught you about yourself?
That I can do a lot more than I thought I could. So I was always quite scared about moving. Um, anyway, so when I moved to Cape Town, that was terrifying. And when I moved here, I was a bit worried that I was going to take forever to fit in, to find something to do, to find a place where I could belong. So when I had moved from, when I'd moved to Cape Town originally, it took me a couple of years to find people that I could engage with and
Mhm.
just, yeah, hang out with and everything. Where here, I was a bit worried that I was going to take very long to meet people. Um,
Yeah.
and that it was just going to be one of those struggles where people would be like, no, we don't want to hang out with you. But again, luckily I got the importer friend, so it helped a lot.
Mm.
Um, it's also taught me that I don't have to be perfect. Um, I'm
Mm.
a bit of a perfectionist with all of the random projects I try and do. I always want it to be perfect, but now I'm getting to the point where it's like, as long as I'm working on something, as long as I'm willing to do something, even if I'm going to be terrible at it, that's okay. I'm putting in the work,
Mm.
trying something new, learning something from it. So, yeah, just being kinder to myself is probably the biggest thing I learned.
So helpful and such a key thing. You don't have to be perfect. I think many of us need to just hold on to that thought, particularly when undertaking big moves and big changes like this in our lives. We do not need to be perfect in it. Now, part of my role as a life coach and what I love doing as a life coach is allowing people to tell stories, which is why there's this space for people to share. Storytelling and crafting your story is very important to me. So, I want to ask you just one creative question. If you were to name this chapter of your life, what title would you give it?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Not something I've given much thought to, but um, since it's a spring and there's lots of new plants growing everywhere, and I've just replanted a few. How about a new pot?
A new pot. It gives this whole idea of growth, and growth can continue even when you're transplanted and moved into a new context. And so that works really well for this chapter of your life, a new pot. Well, if somebody listening is at the beginning of a move like yours, what would you want them to understand?
Things are going to be different. There are going to be things that you miss. You are going to get homesick. But as long as you know the reasons why you moved, why you're planning on moving, what your main driving factor behind it is, hold on to those things and embrace the change. Don't try and fight it. You will always be able to retain who you are and where you're from. You don't have to lose that. You can just embrace it more. Pretty much that.
Well, Mitchell, thank you for sharing your story so openly. I appreciate the way that you've reflected on both the challenges as well as the changes that comes with moving. Well, if you're listening and something in this conversation resonated with you, you are not alone in that. These experiences are often quieter than people expect, but they shape how we see ourselves, how we see our relationships, and where we belong. Home Again is part of Bravely Me, a practice supporting people through life's transitions, identity shifts, and relationship change. If you'd like to explore your own experience more deeply, you can find out more at bravelyme.eu. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.